there's a doodle on my case. Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. Who's that dude? Well, it's John Lennon, so this must have something to do with the Beatles. It's the USA Collection Revolution Casino. So this thing is a limited edition recreation of the guitar that John famously used in many situations, such as the iconic rooftop concert or in the Revolution music video. Epiphone and Gibson USA teamed up to create 1,965 of these. Why is that? Well, it's because this is a recreation of a 1965 Epiphone guitar. But you heard me right, Gibson USA and Epiphone. So before we had the modern day Gibson-made Epiphone casinos like we documented in this episode, there was this iteration, but it's way different. You might notice it says assembled in USA. If you were around or familiar with the 80s, it was very popular for select manufacturers to have guitars made overseas, but then do final assembly in the USA so they can kind of get around saying, yeah, it's USA made. So despite it coming up that these are USA made, they were made in Japan at the Terrada factory. At least the bodies and the necks, where were they actually finished as far as the nitro finish being put on, I'm not entirely too sure. Probably Japan as well. But the electronics and everything, that's the part that was assembled in the USA. So that means we're going to be rocking Gibson P90 pickups. Should be the full-blown Gibson electronics, the nice hardware. These are basically in the same lineup as the Epiphone Elitist series of instruments. If you don't know anything about those, just think really high-end Epiphones. Similar to like what they're doing with the Inspired by Gibson Custom Shop range today. It's basically the older versions of those. But there were two versions of these things. There's a true 1965 version, which is trying to recreate when Lennon first bought it. It had this kind of sunburst finish to it. And then there's this version. It's technically billed as a 68. It's still the same guitar, it's just he sanded the finish off of it. So this one gets more of like a satin finish. Like, I don't want to call it like a really cheap, nasty feeling thing. It's just been roughed up a little bit. And a lot of the hardware, I believe, came from the factory with at least some aging to it. And I gotta remember, these were produced from approximately 1998 till 2000-ish, and both of those runs were within that 1,965 limited edition, so you could just kind of pick your favorite one, as far as glossy sunburst or stripped down natural. However, Epiphone later did an inspired by non-assembled in the USA run from approximately 2009 to 2014. Don't confuse those, they're far from being the same thing. It's also worth mentioning, around 2010 there was another one of these made as a limited edition of 70, with a half and half split of the finishes again, but it was signed by Yoko Ono, it had Lennon's birthday on one of the inlays, and it was only available to the Japanese market, so those are quite rare. But these things were still expensive. I found an old receipt that said $1,900 US, and back in 2000s, adjust for inflation, I mean, you can kind of see. But besides a guitar that looks like John's, not having the pickguard installed from the factory, having the mix-match knob, what else were they giving you for that price? Well, a very deluxe case. Like, this thing is great. Looks exactly like one of the older Lifton styles, so I'm not sure if that's what Epiphone was using at the time or not, but I would imagine so. You get that whole silkscreen of a John Lennon caricature, as well as his signature print. Then from there, the interior is that kind of purpley-ish pink color, and originally it had a case shroud attached to it. This one's just barely hanging on there. You can see where it's been ripped off in a few locations. And if you look close enough, there is an Epiphone E on the top of the lid. But then inside your case compartment, originally it had a pick guard and like some other various paperworks that you can see here on the screen. The only thing left on this one is arguably the most important piece of paper, the certificate of authenticity. However, it looks like it's got some water damage. You can just barely read the limited edition serial. Looks like it says 1271 out of 1965, but have no fear, you can verify that with a sticker on the inside too. But surprisingly, despite not being fully USA built, these things have appreciated pretty decently on the market, mainly because, hey, Beatles. Very famous band, people are nostalgic, they want these things. And I've got to say, this thing actually feels surprisingly good. Like, hear me knock on it. The whole thing's like vibrating. It's got a really nice dark mellow sound to it. However, it's got decrepitly old flat wound strings. I'm not entirely sure if that's factory or not. I know there is some talk that Lennon did like to use flat wound strings, so it's possible, but I don't know for 100% fact. But let's go ahead and throw this one on the workbench to take a look at some of the constructional differences, because that's some of the other reasons why these things were so premium, is they tried to make it as exact as they could. And we also have some like really cool figuring on this one. So let's go ahead and hop on over there now. This is another one of those guitars that David's using my forwarding service on. So thank you, David, for bringing us so many cool guitars on the show. But he ordered the deluxe cleaning package on this one because he found this in a pawn shop. And yeah, needless to say, it was pretty crusty when it first came here, but now it's great. But I wanted to comment on the durability of this satin finish. Usually when you take a satin finish and you use polishing compound, it buffs it up. So when he ordered the cleaning, it's like, I better check just to make sure it won't buff up in like an area right here that gets covered. And to my surprise, this finish was extremely resilient to it. That's actually a good thing if you hate when satin finishes naturally buff like in the high traffic areas. This one seems to fight against that, except for on the neck, but we'll talk about that later. So I'm not sure what kind of special finish they used on here, but it's kind of cool that I could get all the dirt and grime off without losing the whole stripped back look. Here's a look at the neck pickup. I was expecting it just to say like Gibson USA and be the typical Gibson one. However, it's possible that they were trying to actually reissue the vintage look as well. They both have a matching look on the back and a nice patina on the front. I wiped them down, but I didn't want to like super polish these things because I'm pretty sure they left the factory with a little bit of aging. As far as our readings within the circuit, 7.89 k ohms in the bridge pickup, 7.91 in the neck, and the middle just for fun, 3.95. The bridge itself is pretty interesting. It's got nylon saddles, and it is a Gibson branded ABR1 with the wire retainer. That's mounted historically just with the post in the body, but they use a double thumb wheel in order to prevent it from leaning. But you know what? This is just like a Gibson ES330, right? There's no center block in here. So how are they mounting a traditional bridge? I thought that was a no-no. So we actually have the spruce bracing here. So they must leave like a long block of it that allows them to get away with doing that. And this right here was actually the first thing I noticed when I opened the case on this guitar. It's a 5-ply construction top. Gibson likes to use maple poplar maple in a 3-ply sandwich, but these guys utilize 5. And it's maple birch maple birch maple. You can see more of that phenomenon right here with all the layers of wood. And then it has that spruce bracing again like we were talking about. And that's our neck block. Again, this is a full hollow body guitar, no center block. Let's break out the endoscope to discover further. And we'll start on this side of the F-hole. So here we can see our Epiphone tag. It's the E230TD model officially, but more commonly known as the Epiphone Casino. But this thing has a separate serial number, 328393. We'll also find that on the backside of the headstock. But it says Epiphone Incorporated, Kalamazoo, Michigan. Was it actually made there? No, they're just reissuing what they were looking like at this particular point in time. But in our second sound hole, we have a separate sticker that tells you what number it is, so you could see that as another serial if you'd like. But it's number 1271. Of 1965. But as far as construction here, yeah, there's no center block as you can see. You can go all the way over. But now we're looking straight up out of the neck pickup. You can see that spruce bracing along the underside. And now we're back at that neck pickup again. But you can see right here how it's kind of like a center portion running straight down. It's not like they laminated the whole thing with the bracing. It's just kind of that center area. Because now we can actually see the end of the bridge. That's creepy. But it does appear to go all the way down. And here we are up in the cutaway. You can see the kerfing, and that's the neck block. Everything looks pretty basic here. Here's the other cutaway. Honestly, I would say the construction is superior to what we've seen from some Gibson USA products. But as far as getting a peek at our pots, yeah, I think I can just barely make out the Gibson branding right there. Yep, we can see this one even more clearly. So I think that confirms the Gibson USA electronics, and there we can see the style of capacitor they were using. So just as a recap, to the bottom side of this, there's another piece of wood that's probably about this thick, I would say, that runs along the top that allows them to put that bridge in there and give you some more strength to your pickups because it's a fully hollow body. Then it's a pressed top and back of the 5-ply material. Same's probably true for the sides, would be my guess. And then they have the kerfing along the edges to give it more surface area to glue onto. Back to the outside, we've got our tailpiece, regular trapeze style. Ball end of the string goes in back here, and then that secures it to place. And then that secures utilizing your strap button and 2 screws. I might think, hey, what's with the mixed match knobs? Is somebody replacing things? That's what I thought when I first unboxed it, but no, that's a John Lennon thing. Seems most of them online have this chip right here on that tone knob, so I think that's also part of the specs. But 2 volumes, 2 tones, regular stuff. I like this little doofy poker chip. It's smaller than the Gibson version. And then here you can see where the pickguard would be mounted if you had one to put on the guitar. This particular one does not have it. It got lost at some point, but this is how he was known for playing it, so that's why most of these are in this configuration when you see them. A really cool figured maple top on this one. absolutely gorgeous. You have some nice wood grain as well. But moving on from our body, let's talk about our neck. It's a mahogany neck with a rosewood fretboard with 22 frets. And of course, we've got the cool parallelogram inlays. Those frets are looking fantastic now, just needed a bit of TLC. Can't wait to get some fresh strings on this thing. Those old ones were so decrepit. I bet it'll brighten up the tone a bit. But you'll notice this model actually does indeed have fret nibs, so that's pretty cool. And then stock, we have a Corian nut. I'm not sure if they purposefully made it small to mimic his, or somebody's replaced that on this particular one. Either way, it's a little bit smaller than it should be. The neck measures 1.63 inches at the nut, 2.01 by the 12th, 0.84 first fret neck depth, and 0.93 by the 10th. Here's that neck profile at the first fret and the 12th fret, just a nice rounded C. They call it the elliptical neck, so it's kind of like a soft V, like maybe not that extreme, but it definitely has like a little bit of a bump with hardly any shoulders. Check out our headstock being nice and shiny now. I was kind of shocked to see this. They actually use a vintage correct style truss rod. So that's the thing about assembled in the USA. Did they just ship the necks and bodies as it was and then they put it together here, or was it just the electronics? I cannot personally comment on that. Just keep in mind, it wasn't actually made in the USA, just assembled. And here's a look at our cover with the E on it. I found this peculiar. If you follow the light right here, there's almost like something underneath the finish that makes the Epiphone logo a little bit different. Not quite sure what that's about. Now we can move on to the backside. So I believe this one was actually played quite a bit. You can see where somebody's buckle kind of wore through the finish right there. You've got some light worming and impressions in various areas, but again, the satin finish holds up to polishing, which I think is cool. It's got such cool light figuring on here. I love this example. It's cool. However, I did notice it wasn't stored properly humidity-wise. This is what happens to semi-hollows. If they dry out, they start to get these light cracks along the edges. Sometimes you'll also see it on the top. Now, it's definitely the worst on this example down here. Now, are they full on cracks? I don't think so. I mean, they could be. I'm not an expert necessarily, but they definitely can become a problem. So I just wanted you to be aware of that. Got a couple other ones over here where your arm would rest on the other side. So pretty much just all along the edges on this one. And besides that, you do have some worming marks and impressions. As far as the neck goes, right at the heel, you've got a small ding/chip and some scratches. And somebody was probably using a capo on this one because you got a lot of impressions on it, as well as some worn through finish areas and just a few spots, as well as along here. And this neck is more of a proper semi-gloss at this point, but that was just naturally buffed up through play, so I just decided to really go into it just to make it a nice even feel. But if you're thinking, hey, somebody swapped out Clusons for Grovers, not on this model. This is actually how Lennon had his spec'd out, so that's kind of impressive that they spec'd it out the same. There's that assembled in the USA sticker, and you've got some additional wear over here, as well as some wear along the top edge. And there's that serial number I was talking about. All said and done, this one's pretty light, 6 pounds, 5.9 ounces. So let's go ahead and plug it in and hear how these P90s sound. Before we even plug it in, I just want to say, I love just sitting and playing this thing. It balances so well, it's lightweight, super resonant, just a lot of fun to play. I think it has to do with the finish. It feels really good. like it. These P90s are great. So what are my final thoughts on this thing? Well, I think I just told you. I actually really like this thing. Like, if I needed something to play at home or at gigs, I would seriously consider one of these. And, before David said, hey, you want to do the forwarding service on this? I was like, okay, yeah, it's kind of one of those models that I should document. I did not expect to like it as much as I did. Unfortunately, he is after a 3-pickup Les Paul Custom. So if anybody's interested in making a swap, feel free to let us know. Otherwise, he actually decided to put this one in on consignment with me. So it is available, but please do not see this as like an advertisement. I mean, yes, you know what you're going to get if you buy this now, but all that aside, this is awesome. There's a reason why people like these things, and I get it now. Even as a non-Super Beatles guy, so if you can ever find one for a good price, give it a try. But if nothing else, I hope you enjoyed learning about this instrument like I did. Alright, Troglodytes, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll catch you tomorrow on the next one. Take care. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, consider subscribing. I post videos like this every day. And you might even enjoy this next one.